Welcome everyone. So nice to see so many popping up here. We'll just give it a minute or so because we see that the numbers are going up quickly. It's a beautiful and sunny day here in the Nordics, and I believe in Ireland as well.
Spring has sprung.
Spring has definitely sprung. But you never know. I think it's going to be cold this weekend again. In the Nordics, you can never take it for granted that it's here to stay. You might
I was going to say you're unpredictable, but that would be inappropriate. We are too.
Yeah. See a lot of people joining. I think my colleagues are busy accepting everyone in the lobby. I'll just kick off very soon. That's okay with you, Gary and Henrik?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start off. It's looking like it's starting to slow down a little bit in the acceptance. But yeah, welcome to this webinar. It's about data center outlook in Ireland, Denmark and beyond. And we are very glad to see so many registered and logged in. I'm Karin Angus. I work for Enterprise Ireland, where I am a senior market advisor for the high-tech construction sector in the Nordics. I'm also the global lead on data centers. Enterprise Ireland, for those of you that don't know, is the Irish government's trade and innovation agency. We help Irish companies start, grow and export. We have offices in Copenhagen and Stockholm here in the Nordics, and it's from here that we cover the Nordic region and help Irish companies export to the 5 Nordic countries. With me, I have Henrik Hansen, who is CEO with the Danish data center industry, and Gary Connolly, who is founder of Digital Infrastructure Ireland. This webinar is the first of several events planned in 2025 in collaboration between Enterprise Ireland, the Danish data center industry, and Digital Infrastructure Ireland. Members of Enterprise Ireland and Digital Infrastructure Ireland can participate in Data Centers Denmark in Copenhagen on 15th of May with a discount. And there will be a study exchange business development trip in November to Dublin, probably in conjunction with Data Centers Ireland. Throughout this webinar, please add questions in the comments throughout, and you can like comments if you want to hear the answer so that we specifically see that that's a popular question. Okay, guys, let's start before we move into the country presentations about Ireland and Denmark on what data means to society. Why do we need data and what is a data center? I guess data centers can be considered the beating heart of the digital economy. So what are your thoughts on what data means to society, Gary and Henrik? Don't know if you want to kick off, Gary, first there, or?
Yes, thank you so much, firstly, for organizing this. I much appreciate it. It's always nice to collaborate. So you said 2 things just there at the end of that introduction. One was digital economy and the other was society. I'm actually more inclined to say society rather than digital economy. Why? Because when we say things like digital economy, and 99% of people don't know what that is, it feels like they're excluded from some economy that they're not involved in. Where in an actual fact, digitalization or data or digital economy is just part of a bigger economy. And therefore, when we talk about digitalization, which people love, that really is just data. And data ultimately then needs to be kept out of the rain, needs to be distributed, and needs to be worked on in a place called a center. And that's why we often don't give enough recognition for the fact that there's 2 words in data center. The why, which is data, and the what, which is centers. So I think often when we get into these types of discussions, we don't spend enough time, and thank you for taking the time today to talk about the why, which is the data. And as I'll go through in a little bit in my own presentation, it really is the catalyst of this industrial age, data. And everything we're doing, including this call, is because of data. And those datas have to go through things called a center. Like water has to go through a reservoir, or a battery has to go through or electricity has to go through a battery. So thank you for taking the opportunity to explain what data is in a bit more detail than just the centers, because one is the why, the other is the how.
Yeah, true. Thank you, Gary, for explaining that so well. Henrik, do you have any words to add to that?
Yes, also thanks from my side for this great cooperation with our Irish friends, and thanks, Karen, for moderating. Just continuing a little bit on the why part. When we look at society today, we have many rather big challenges. We have issues with our climate, we have issues with competitiveness, we have issues with health situations, we have issues with defense, and so on. All of these issues need new ways of solving these challenges. And as Gary said, data is really the key for this. So when we look at data centers, I think also when we should present what data centers are, it's very important to emphasize that we are the wheel, or part of the wheel, that actually is necessary facilities to make solutions based on data. So look at the why from an end user perspective. What does intelligent use of data mean to people struck with some kind of complex disease, or a big climate issue, becoming better at predicting how is the weather gonna be in a few days? Can we react beforehand, and so on? All these benefits to society, that's really the engine we are part of as data centers, and I think we should emphasize that a lot more.
You're so absolutely right, and a personal example of that I'd have would be my own wife was diagnosed 30 plus years ago with melanoma cancer. And if we look at that 30 years, how data has changed the therapy for that, it's really interesting, because only 30 years ago, maybe 25, to look at the skin surface and look at the molds and stuff, you had to use a magnifying glass physically. And you did what's called mole mapping, and you went through it, and they basically said, oh, that one's getting bigger, or that one's getting smaller. Now, when she goes to get her annual check, she walks into what can a bit like the security screening machine in the airport, where you hold your arms away from your body. And now within a pico or a micron, it can tell you the different colors, the different textures, what's changed within 1% or half of 1%. That's data in the healthcare system that basically is being feeding into an algorithm that goes onto a center to be stored for next year, so it can be compared. And I think they're the examples of the invisible use of data that needs centers. And that's why I always try and bring it to a personal level, because most people say Netflix or social media and stuff. It's only a tiny part, actually. Between 6 and 8% of the world's data is entertainment and social media. So you have to ask, well, what's the other 94%? It's running smart cities. It's running emergency services. It's running all the other facilities that we now take for granted. And then it should be of no real surprise to people, if that is the case, that you have a supercomputer in your hand creating supercomputer amounts of data, that you actually need centers to keep the rain off it so that you can use it again in the future. And that's sort of often missed. And again, I commend you for starting off by allowing us to frame why we have data, and gives context then for the sectors which we're going to discuss now. Well done.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you, for some great comments there around what data is and what it means to us, and can't really go back here either, really, it's just forward. So let's move into now where we are in both countries. We thought we'll do some short PowerPoint presentations here actually on the situation in Ireland and Denmark. So I thought, Gary, we'll start with you in Ireland.
Thank you. Now here we're going to test my own abilities. I'm going to press a button here and hopefully I'm sharing the right screen, and it is the PowerPoint presentation that I prepared.
Let's see.
And not an old one.
No, that's correct. But yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I'm not going to take too much time because I really enjoy the questions and answers aspects of these sessions. So welcome everybody, wherever you're tuning in. And this is the beauty of this particular platform, is you can be anywhere in any time zone, and you're welcome in any of those languages. Some of them I even understand myself. You may notice, any of you who are eagle-eyed, that Host in Ireland, which you probably are more familiar with, is now Digital Infrastructure Ireland. We changed it 6 weeks ago. Why did we change it 6 weeks ago? Well, it's not just to get a new brand. It's because in the 10 years of Host in Ireland, 11 now, what we've seen a broadening and a vast integration of the ecosystem, not just to be hosting of data in a geography. We've seen the ecosystem grow, and it's great that we're collaborating today with the Danish data center infrastructure group, because it's about the Ireland and the Irish. And the Irish are actually a bit like our traditional diaspora. We seem to like to travel, we like to do stuff, we like to make influence. So Digital Infrastructure Ireland now is a much broader group. Going back into our first discussion, and I guess compounding it and giving some historical reference for data in 2025, I guess it's easier for us to look at historical than project future, because the future is unknown to many degree. But data in 2025 has the same transformative effect as steam had in the 1760s, which was the first industrial age. And again, we had data, we had steam well in advance of 1860, 1870. What changed was the fact that we had the technologies to take the steam and focus it on a piston. And that piston then was able to create an engine that brought water up from the mines. That was the first real application of it. So we always had steam. We then were able to actually use it for an industrial process that then had the knock-on effect. Data is exactly the same. We've had it for a great amount of time. Today, however, we have the other tools, smartphones, processing power, etc., that we can get what's most important from data, which is intelligence and insights. So that's the fundamental difference now to, say, 20, 30 years ago. So again, that just qualifies and backs up what myself and Henrik said earlier, is the steam equivalent of this industrial age is data. So Ireland, not a familiar sight in Ireland, thank goodness, anymore in Dublin. But when we joined the European Union, which is just over 50 years ago, this was a common enough sight on the main street leading from the north of Dublin into the ports. Live cattle. That was our biggest export in 1973. We weren't even monetizing the cuts. We were actually using and exporting live animals on the hoof. Our second largest export, and if any of the Irish diaspora are listening, they'll understand this. Our second largest export were people, because Ireland was a farming economy to the greatest degree. So in the same way as we must transform, when you lack oil, when you lack gold, when you lack other minerals and other resources, you've got to be innovative. You've got to use what you've got. And what did we have? We had the US diaspora, the United States diaspora, where we've got 13% of North Americans are Irish American. Most of them, few of them, were involved in what we call ICT, which is information, communications, and technology. Again, if you look at this wave of the 5 waves from mainframe all the way through to today, then you get a context for why DEC, IBM, Siemens, and there's early ICT companies have gone through the waves, and now they're called Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, Dropbox, etc. So you can start to see, and when you see that change over the 50 years, 5 decades of 5 different types of technology, you can then get a context for why Ireland is a place where we have 1,400 megawatts of a thing called data centers. Really? Why? Because in 25 years ago, we used to export these things, floppy disks, CD-ROMs. For anybody under the age of, I guess 30, this isn't the save button on your Microsoft Windows or Word. It actually was a thing. And we were the largest exporter of this software data on a medium, the center, but it was called a floppy disk or a CD-ROM. So that's what we used to export. But of course, that was all coming to an end in the early noughties or late 1990s, and we got really active building what was called offshore fiber cables. So no longer were we delivering our software on the disks in boxes and 40-foot containers. We were exporting it in this new thing that was coming from the United States called superhighway, subsequently the cloud. And basically we started to build, and where were we going to store all these floppies? In a server. And where were we going to put these servers? In a center. And that's why you start to see the proliferation of offshore fiber cables replacing the box 40-foot containers on ships. So you can sort of get some context as to how we arrive at a situation where we are one of the largest exporters of data in Europe. Unlike, and I guess it's important to say, Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, and Paris traditionally, who were financial bourses. They were financial centers of excellence. Therefore, they had all the connectivity for low frequency trading, and then they built on around that for other services like data services, data center services. We were a data from the punch card, as it were. All the cables came down. Where did they go to? Well, they went to Dublin, T50, M50. That's why when you look at a metro of Dublin, you're going to see the proliferation of that 1,400 megawatts in the greater Dublin area. It's because where the fibers come in. There's about 2.5 billion euros worth of fiber in, on, and around the island of Ireland. 98% of it is in the greater Dublin area. What does it mean for today? And what does it mean for the growth? Well, we've seen a significant growth really since the early 10s as the cloud platforms started to adopt, as unfortunately that word cloud has proliferated, because many people talk about the cloud as if it doesn't have a data center behind it. But the reality is that all this growth in the cloud has to be backed up with something physical. And as you can see there, gradually, and as they built, we built the facilities and the capacity required, with great growth spurts up to about 2021, and then it's fairly much flattened out since we've had what we call a de facto moratorium, which is not even as good as a moratorium, but we'll talk about that in a second. Hyperscale is really just another name for the large cloud platform providers. The scale that they're building, it's not that they're better or they're any worse, it's just the type hyperscale or type of data center. What we see, and I'm sure Henrik, you'll talk about it also, is that in the same way as retail isn't all the same, you have very big retail and you have very small retail, the same can be said about data centers. You have very large ones, you have small ones, and you have everything in between. So basically Ireland, as we're a foreign direct investment place for Asian American companies. They tend to be big. They tend to be scale. And as we replace the floppy disks, we needed scale. And that's how we arrive with such a large amount of the large platforms, as you see on the right-hand side. How many have we got? As you can see, a lot of campuses. We were doing campuses in Dublin, the greater Dublin area, probably one of the first, because land really isn't a challenge in Ireland. Obviously, power is a challenge everywhere, but land really wasn't. And particularly as we were transitioning from light industrial, we had quite a bit of light industrial space. your other partner company in the foreign direct investment space, the International Development Authority, IDA, would have had space in their parks to facilitate some of these types. You can see the value, and when I look at it now, I used to be so proud of those numbers up to about 2023, until I started to see things like Zaragoza in Spain are now building data centers at the same capital value in 2 to 3 years what we built in 25. But I think that up to 2022-3, we were the home of the cloud. Now we're starting to see a whole new industrial age driven by AI. That's not bad. We've lasted nearly 20 minutes without mentioning AI. That's pretty good for a normal. I was doing my best. But as you can see, it's pretty much leveled off at the moment, and we'll talk about why that is in a few minutes. A lot of discussion, and I'm sure, like Henrik, about sort of, well, what does it mean that you're taking 21% of the electricity? Well, actually, what it means is that just the narrative is wrong, because we're a rock on the outcrop of Europe. We're surrounded by renewable energy. We're surrounded by the ability to actually harness that electricity. So effectively, it's actually a reflection of the fact that we're not generating enough electricity, that data centers take 21%. And then we can argue the case that it's actually 21% of something that is infinite for the Irish grid. So it's not like it's a finite. More importantly, and for people who are listening in, more to build a case to be a detractor for this asset class as much as to support it, I think we have to be realistic, and we have to say, okay, it's 21%. That's quite a lot of electricity, no doubt. What is that? What is the electricity in Ireland contributing in terms of our greenhouse gases? Well, it's actually contributing electricity in its whole about 17.5%. A little bit less, maybe 15%. So what it actually means is data centers in Ireland are 2.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Very important, because the 21% lends itself for you to believe, well, it's 21% of all greenhouse gases. No, 21% of the electricity. And these are discussions that don't take place. I see Henrik nodding his head as well, because people like to throw in then it's 21% of all energy, which it's not, because all energy includes transport and housing and the whole lot. So there's a lot of words that we use that should be clarified. It's electricity. Data centers need electrons. Electrons are then converted in the centers to the data that we talked about, and that's then exported via fiber in photons. It's all science, but you know, we lose a lot of people. So when we look at data centers and we look at that lower one, we often think, wow, wonder what the 97.5% of the other greenhouse gases, they must be sitting back and going, well, at least we're not data centers. And that's a real challenge for us, right? What does it mean for Ireland? Why are we fighting for it so strongly? Because ICT, data in the centers, is part of our largest export by far. ICT and related services will be about 270 billion of our economic export from Ireland, of our services, and it's 25% of all of our service exports. That's why it's so important that the centers are facilitated for the data that's monetized like it was on the floppy disks and exported internationally. Now, for those of you, I'm going to finish with a slight agriculture, like, because I started with a picture of a cow, and I don't blame me for this joke, but I just do like it. It's David McWilliams, which is one of our esteemed economists, said in 2002, I think, when this was done, I don't have the glasses, but I think it was Q4 2001. He said Ireland has finally gone from a spud economy to a chip economy. Sorry, I can't take total credit. If you like it, it's mine. If you don't, it's David McWilliams. So as you can see, you're getting a sense there for why we want it, the size, the growth, the legacy. And I'll hand you back now to Angus. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gary. Great presentation on Ireland and good overview. Just before we move into Denmark here, there is a quick question here that you can answer probably quickly, Gary. Is Digital Infrastructure Ireland for the whole island of Ireland, so both the Republic and Northern Ireland?
No.
Only the Republic.
It's no and yes. Okay, so it's a great question. The two very distinct geographic locations, two very distinct from a policy perspective. Corporate, you saw even yesterday, I said we wouldn't mention it, but now we've got a different tariff region. So in terms of sort of the policy type of stuff, it can be a challenge. In terms of the operators, it's a totally different jurisdiction they're working in. However, what we have quite a few now Northern Belfast supply chain people who are part of the ecosystem because they're designing and building and operating centers all over the world. So we're not in a position just yet, nor I'm not sure. It'd be like the Danish Data Center Association for your operators also being part of the Dutch. It's very different, right? It's different policy, it's different regulations, it's different carbon emission heads. So that whole policy stuff is very different in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. So right now, we're not looking to be that one place or one voice for both sides. But for the supply chain, absolutely, it's different. It's a different proposition because they're more trying to export from the island of Ireland.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, Jan, for the question. And just a reminder to everyone, do keep the questions coming if you want the answers here from us. Please, Henrik, your turn to talk a little bit about Denmark.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to make sure you can see my screen now.
Yeah, and you can go into presentation mode as well.
Yes, I'll do that. Just a second. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks, Gary, for this very nice introduction, both to the Irish history, but also, of course, to the current situation in the data center market. And I will not do the same, but of course, I will touch upon many of the same aspects as Gary did. So I'll try to give you an outlook on what's going on in the Danish market. And before that, just a couple of slides explaining our association. You could say that we come from the lower stack, from the building facilities, the power, the cooling. And we still, of course, have a lot of focus on that amongst our members. But we are increasingly also climbing up this ladder and include more and more actors and stakeholders on the other stack positions. And also, I would say, in the last year or two, we have gained a lot more interest also from the end users, the large enterprises using all these facilities and all these services. And also, well, especially in the last year, very much interest from investors. So it's like new stakeholders really coming into this market very, very actively and very engaged. So now we are more than just being an industry association. We consider ourselves being an ecosystem around data centers and around the needs of the digital society, you could say. These are our members. I won't go through them all, but just to give you an idea of the spread and also the variety of members from operators, suppliers, municipalities, etc. And also a good number of educational institutions that we might have a talk about later. What's going on in Denmark? We are some years behind Ireland. You said 1400 megawatt. We have current, I'll get back to that, but current a little above 300 megawatt. So a lot smaller market, but growing quite heavily. But the pipeline, as we see it right now, we have a lot of interest coming into the western part of Denmark, where we have a lot of available land. We have a good source of green power. So we are well settled to receive data centers in that region. as of now, but also a strong interest in the Sealand, in the eastern part of the country where Copenhagen is located. We have a little bit more limitations on the land available. It's a little bit more difficult to get the power, but still there are opportunities also to expand in that part of the country. So that's basically what we are looking into together with the Energy Agency and the Danish TSO. And we have a lot of discussion back and forth now on when we potentially are gonna use as much share of the power as you experience in Ireland. What kind of wishes or requirements will we meet from the TSO side in terms of flexibility, in terms of grid interaction and integration and so on? And maybe we can get back to that as well. The current situation as Ireland, we are also quite heavily covered by hyperscalers, which covers about 70% of all uptake as of now. It will change a little bit, we expect, over the next 5 years, but currently 335 megawatt total installed and 130 approximately under construction. And if we look at our outlook, we will present our annual market report in May at the Data Center Denmark event, May 15th. And these numbers are not quite done, but these are the numbers we have today. It might be adjusted a little bit with things that have come to our knowledge within the last couple of weeks. But this is how we look at the future. We have predictions going up to 2028, where we see 806 megawatt expected, with a little bit different in allocation between colos and hyperscalers. We do see a heavier growth in the colo segment in the coming years. So we will be something like a 60-40 share between those two segments. So now if we're looking at this situation with this growth, whether it's gonna be a little more than double up as we see it by 28, and we have an energy agency who expects a factor 6 by 2030, which is a higher number than we look into, but whoever has the right number or come closest, we know that this will grow very, very heavily. So what we see from our point of view is that this really requires new ways of doing business and working with innovation and new partnerships in terms of really meeting these challenges or opportunities over the coming years. And I was just playing around with words, and yes, sir, is something everybody can understand. I could say that to Gary. But what is sir? Well, it's a requirement to be sustainable, to be innovative, to be reliable, and to be responsible. I think if we can really live up to these target words, well, then we are well off, because it's very much about how is our narrative towards the surrounding society. And if we are a reliable partner for other parts of and other industries, and we are responsible in the way we behave, and we are open to innovation and to working together on the sustainability issue with other partners, I think we are in a very good position to get another type of acceptance from politicians, from media, but also from the general population. I think it's very much about bringing these data centers down to your daily life. We often tell people that when in your normal Danish life, where we are one of the most digitalized countries in the world, you are in contact with maybe 35, 40 data centers during your average day. At work, when you are in Teams meetings or doing other things, but also when you go to your doctor and get your medical journal, and when you go to do financial transaction, or you go to the grocery store, it's all depending on the digital infrastructure and data centers. So we want to really explain this to our surrounding society, that this is just making your life much easier than it would have been otherwise. So when we look at these new innovation and partnerships, we were in 2023, we helped the birth of this Net Zero Innovation Hub, where our target is to bring both parties within the industry that normally consider themselves as heavy competitors, but also actors outside our industry, from the energy sector, utility sector, other maybe agriculture, really bringing all these parties together and see how can we do business together? How can we work on the business model around data centers in order to get data centers much more integrated with the surrounding society? So we established this Net Zero Innovation Hub, and now we are gaining traction. We had the 6 founding members, Danfoss, Data4, Google, Microsoft, Schneider, and Vertiv. The good combination of large operators, both on the hyperscale and on the colo side, and then some very ambitious solution providers who can bring new ideas also to the table. And then things have picked up, and now we get good access to other companies who want to bring in their innovative capacity and really bring in all their competences and experiences to the table, where everybody knows that you're gonna meet competitors. So you might have to open up for some of the things that you normally would consider as confidential material. But if we want to make new solutions, really breaking down barriers, we need to work together in a different way. And that's also why we include a lot of academic and other association partners into this, because they can think more neutral and don't have the same commercial pressure as some of the other members. So just as one of the last things that I would put in, I just want to show you an example of how we see the data centers in the future, where we see it much more integrated. And I know that that's also something you're looking into in Ireland, and how you maybe can bring more investments into Ireland, even though there is some limitations as of now from the public grid. But trying to build these island on land, where you do these symbiosis, industrial symbiosis, where you have the energy, you have the data center, you have your own energy production on site for backup purposes, and you also have some heat off takers. So you can do the sort of the circularity in your own setting, and not being too dependent or requiring too much from the grid and from other public utilities. So this is the way we work now, and we talk a lot with the energy sector. How can we do this in a way that it's also attractive economically? Because we need to make this good business, otherwise it's not going to happen. So these are some of the areas that we are looking into and trying really to see what are the benefits for data centers, what are the benefits for energy providers, and what are the benefits for investors and developers, because there has to be something in it for everybody. And actually also for the public sector, who should speed up approval process around these setting, because that will also bring these to life much quicker if we can do it behind the meter or do other kinds of setup. So this is what we work on with the Net Zero Innovation Hub, and we invite everybody to be part of that work. And just a commercial to end up, we have in the DDI, we have the Danish Data Center Industry Awards on May 14th, where we celebrate the good stories from our industry, both people who have done a great job, new technologies brought to the market, and sustainable data center operations as well. We have 9 categories. I won't go into that in depth, but you can see that in our website. And the day after, we have the Data Centers Denmark big conference in Copenhagen for the, I think, 5th or 6th time. And we gather around 400 people really discussing with end users. Normally we have 1/4 of the participant will come from end user companies, because they are very attractive for us as an industry, because we need to know what do you need from us? How can we support, going back to the why that we discussed in the beginning, how can we support the applications and the development of your companies? Because that's why we're here. We're not here just to run data centers. We're here for a higher purpose. And that's a good arena to have a good discussion on that. So I look forward to seeing many of you at this event. And this is the team, and I will close with that and hope we can have some good discussions for the rest of the webinar. So back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for that presentation about Denmark. Very interesting. And yes, I'm looking forward to Data Centers Denmark as well. I think we've touched on it, both of you, but I thought we'll do this question before we move into the questions from the audience. If you have anything to add here that hasn't been said yet, what is the public conception of data centers, and what can we do to affect that narrative? That's obviously important. And like I said, you have touched upon it, both of you, but is there anything you would like to add here when it comes to the public conception and what we can do to affect that narrative?
I can maybe go first. I think we need to bring more facts to the table. As Gary explained, I think that's a very good way of that. One thing is that you are using 21% of the power, but it's only 2.5% of the emissions. I think that's very important knowledge. So that's one part that's maybe a little bit technical for many people to look into that. But I think also it's important, instead of telling people that we are doing a lot of good, really showing it by bringing in some good cases. What are these data actually used for? What kind of solutions are coming out in the world and really solving some big issues? So rather telling and showing this story, and then say the assumption for this is a strong digital infrastructure. It's a lot of data and a lot of centers being built around both of our countries.
Yeah, thank you, Henrik. Gary, and you're muted, just so you know.
Yeah, I'd add to that by bringing some historical context to this. Around 1998, there was a lot of discussion among the large software companies at the time, who would have been IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, around what would the term be for having computers outside of your building that could be shared. And we know now that the winning term was a marketing term called cloud computing. But the term that came second, and I always preferred it, was called grid computing. Because grid computing, when you think of it, you know there's something physical and tangible, don't you? Whereas cloud, lots of people who should know better actually think that it's something magical when it's not. It's physical. And also it brings me to one of the areas that Henrik was saying about case studies and examples. Case studies and examples of the benefit and the why of data centers actually isn't in the center at all. It's in what that data is doing in society. And there's where the problem is. Let me just give you an example. And if anybody's listening here from this fraternity, I'd ask you to listen and please use some of the comments. There was an AI conference here in Dublin over the last 2 days. Well, it was on Tuesday. And you had the greatest and the best of people in the App Store who were designing, building algorithms, applications to solve real world problems. And what are the two major real world problems, apart from hunger? And that is digitalization and decarbonization. So these were the big issues that were being addressed, along with other stuff. I asked somebody, I wasn't there myself, I asked somebody to tell me at the end of the day, how many times was data center used by any of the people on the stage who were explaining that they were going to change the world? And the answer was 0. Not a single one of the people. But But cloud was used as if it was going out of fashion. Probably tens of 20s of 30s of 40 times. So what does that leave the people who, Henrik, you said technical, less technical, feel when they come away from that? They basically feel that the cloud is something really special, but there's no direct connection with data centers. That's done on purpose, by the way, because the app people and the people who are changing, they want to make sure that there is no negative connection that might be with data centers with their story. So until such time as those people who are using data centers, calling it the cloud, call it data centers, we are really struggling to change personal public opinion on why I need data centers. And it's a real challenge. Because when I listen to people in this industry, which is most, I know you're going up the stack, Henry, but if you look at people in the physical layer, the data center layer, the server layer, even the operating system layer, they're actually like the IT department in organizations. They're not the business. The business are the people who are actually the people that we need to be doing the bidding for this industry. My sense is that I don't, and I've tried to think of one other industry, from pharmaceuticals to life sciences to retail. What other industry can anybody tell me has the facilities department doing the PR? None. This group here, data center, the center part of this discussion are facilities and building management people. The tenants are the data, the tenants are the app store. The app store are the people who usually do the PR. And there's a massive disconnect because they call it the cloud. And until we get that wheels in motion, that's the first thing. And I know I don't want to take too much time. The other is we have to be fully mindful of every time that there's a significant change in any of those industrial ages, you have massive resistance. Always. It's human nature. You know, when you think about sort of who were the biggest detractors to cars and roads in the United States around the late 1980s or 1880s, the people selling oats to the horses. They were the people who were the massive detractors digging up the roads, because you don't need oats for cars. So you'll always have this in the background as well. Human nature is always to err towards the new guy in the block because of lack of knowledge. Time will go by when my children and stuff will see that the cloud is actually a data center and all that type of stuff. But right now, there's a lot of duty of care right now for the people who use the services of a center, the data people, to step up and start using the word data center as much, if not more, than using the cloud. And that brings it more and more then into, oh, so I can't do the health system or the retail system or the life system without a data center, which we also call a cloud. And it's a real challenge that doesn't get discussed enough, in my opinion.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Henrik. That was great. We do have some questions here from the audience. I thought we'll take them now. See if you can answer them. How long time does it usually take to get a grid connection for a new greenfield 100 megawatt data center in Ireland or in Denmark?
That's such a great question. I don't know if this translates to Denmark, but how long is a piece of string? I think that is, if I speak for Ireland right now, that is the greatest challenge. We've done a terrible job in having two very distinct polarizations on the discussion, where we can't join in the middle. That demand for green electricity is a massive inhibitor, or sorry, a massive stimulator for the supply of electricity into a grid. So taking electrons off, putting it on. We've done a really bad job of that, and we've polarized ourselves to the stage where we've got now inertia in the system because of fear. To answer the direct question, we have some cautious optimism right now that after 10 years, and it has a link to Denmark, Apple announced a large campus in Ireland and a large campus in Denmark 10 years ago in and around this month. It's the 10th year anniversary. So let's say what Denmark have done is you've delivered. What Ireland has done is up to recently, we haven't delivered, nor have we learned. So now, however, after 10 years, we finally have, in our opinion, the right people in the right positions in the government to be able to make a pragmatic decision based on climate targets, grid upgrades, economic value. And we will be cautiously optimistic right now with the new connection requests from our regulators that there is a new tone being applied that is going to bring those three strands together. How do we increase renewable penetration on the grid, maintain economic growth, and basically be able to demonstrate that there is a grid positive by having demand that can be flexible. It's the whole idea of a smart grid, right? Is that these guys can be very smart connecting to the grid. So the direct question is right now, you will be very hard, in fact, impossible in a lot of the geographies in Ireland to get a guaranteed 100 meg for your question. The grid, you can have these islanded data centers, which are off grid. So at this moment in time, we believe that all the parameters, all the mistakes, all the discussions have taken place now. The right people are in the table in cabinet now to be able to make a common sense, pragmatic decision. It won't be a straight line, obviously, but to answer the question, 100 meg in a geographic location in Ireland right now, even in the unconstrained areas, you'd be struggling.
Thank you, Gary. Do you know about Denmark, Henrik?
Yes, of course, it depends very much. Some areas are prepared to this, so you can access this quite quickly if you're very flexible on where you want to have your site. But if it's a greenfield and you don't have the build out already of the necessary grid facility, you should look into, I would say, 18, 24 months, something like that. That's how it is now. It's very much discussion in Denmark now on the grid development and expansion, and it goes too slow. We need really to speed up the process of developing our infrastructure, expanding the infrastructure, because it has to go hand in hand with the expansion of renewable energy. It's not very valuable if we get a lot of renewable energy up and running and we don't have the grid to support it. So these things have to come hand in hand.
And that's a great point that you make. And actually, for the person who raised the question, it's a challenge to get 100 meg green field anywhere with a grid connection, probably in Europe right now. Yeah. You may be able to do it off site. You may be able to do an energy center. You may be able to do a transition. But it's actually, even the sites in Iberia and stuff, I mean, they're given an amount now with a guarantee in years for the top up. Because what we're also going through, and this is the thing that often gets forgotten, the grids themselves, irrespective of data centers, have been struggling to go through this immense transition to intermittent power sources. They're moving from electricity systems that pretty much were the same structure and design for 100 years to one that's smart, interconnected, and all the rest. But I think what's promising, not just in Denmark, not just in Ireland, but after 10 to 12 years of not knowing even from policymakers what the question was, at least now they know what the question is, understand it, to be able to make informed decisions on what the answer should be. Whereas up to now it was, these data centers, we had the dot-com bubble and they went away and they left us with a big hole. This is not going away. This is so different. So I think that 10 years cannot be seen as wasted. if the people that are being asked of the questions at least understand the question and then are able to give informed, balanced decisions, not just on electricity, but on the grid, on the, as you said, Henrik, the supply onto the grid, we can now start at least to have that balanced discussion going forward.
Great. Thank you. Here's a question about liquid cooling. How do you see liquid cooling for the future for data centers? How important is this to secure sustainability with less energy consumption? The long perspective for being responsible. So yeah, how do you see liquid cooling for the future for data centers?
When I think about liquid cooling, I think about data. I think about not all data is the same. And I think of, came out of college in 1987. I was the worst COBOL programmer that God ever put on this earth. And yet in 2025, we still have COBOL programs running, which have are mainframes. Liquid cooling is absolutely part of the blend and the mix right now and the design for certain types of data, which is going to be running on severe 60 to 70 kilowatt racks of high output heat from CPUs, from NVIDIA and stuff. We're constantly in the IT space in a transition from on-premise to off-premise, transition from X type of off-site to the cloud, and sometimes back again. But without question, for the densities that we're looking at, air and free air cooling, all that is not going to do it. But I'd see us in a, like always, we're in a hybrid. And now the good news is we've the technologies with the different cooling systems, with the different chips to be able to facilitate hybrids. But you won't have all immersive cooling or all air. You'll have a hybrid based on the geography and also, most importantly, the type of data.
Yeah. Denmark.
Yeah.
Denmark. Henrik, do you have a comment there?
No, I think it has just been an interesting development. If we look back just actually very few years, it was very skeptical opinions about liquid cooling, and it wasn't really taking pace. But now with AI deployments, high performance compute, it's a completely different game. So it's going to be interesting to see that development. And I think many of the larger sites in the future, as Gary says, it'll be a hybrid solution that you will have to implement. So that's a way it goes.
It's just physics, Karen.
Yeah.
It's just physics. How do you get rid of all that heat quicker? And you're not going to do that with a fan.
No.
And if you've got that densities, and that's the great news. The great news is before we never had it. Like immersive cooling is there since the mainframes. It's not new.
No. Time is running really fast when you have fun, gentlemen. We are not going to have time to answer all these questions, but I want to finish on this one. We only have 2 more minutes, so I think the concluding question will be, we have slightly different approaches to data centers in Denmark and Ireland, but the important thing here is what can we learn from each other, and what opportunities do you guys see for collaboration between Irish and Danish data centers, and how can these partnerships drive innovation and growth? Do you have any comments on that?
I'll take 30 seconds to say what we can learn from the Danish is that you for a very long time have seen renewable energy and your access to it as an inhibitor, or as a stimulant for growth. Your access to it as and I see it even with the Irish Wind Energy ex-CEO went to Denmark to become a professor to learn about it. We could learn from you that what you've done is you see the electricity electron that you can generate, you see it as a stimulant for other growth in industries. In Ireland right now, we don't seem to be able to connect the supply, which we've got in abundance, with the opportunity for the demand. That's what we can learn from you.
Perfect. Thank you. Henrik?
Yeah. From my point of view, we can learn, as we are trying to now, how to build an exporting sector. Because when data centers started to be built in Denmark, I mean, all the Irish pubs were full every night because a lot of Irish companies came into our country. We're trying to pick up some of the ideas and the knowledge, and actually looking into how can our experience in Denmark be used for exporting the knowledge, the way we do things. So I think we can learn a lot from you on that.
Yeah, I agree. Great. Thank you so much, Gary and Henry, and Henrik, for an interesting hour. It's gone over so quickly. And also thank you for all your colleagues involved. I know they're hardworking colleagues in the background, both with Digital Infrastructure Ireland and the Danish data center industry. I think we all three really look forward to further collaboration, and that as many as possible can attend Data Centers Denmark in Copenhagen in May, and also the study trip to Ireland in November. We will be sending out the slides and the recordings of this webinar. And yeah, thank you, Gary, Henrik. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for asking questions and for being there. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.